Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you this then, before we end. Because what I'm seeing now, for a while, I think that a lot of people like yourself and others who were trying to alert your fellow citizens to the issues and the perils facing the country, a lot of the effort was going into exactly that, into education, to try to make people aware of what was happening. Now I get the sense that people are waking up en masse to what's going on, and I feel that it may be time to look towards some solutions. In your view, how can, because again, this is something that I brought up with Dr. Lackman before, because we talked about the possibility of a full default and a return to the drachma, and what he said was, well, that's a very feasible option if there were to be cooperation with the international bodies and the other banks. But if the banks don't cooperate, and if the EU and the IMF don't cooperate with Greece, it could be a very difficult time. But regardless, it may seem that Greece is stuck between a rock and a hard place, where they don't have any choice but to default on this debt, and it's just a matter of how to manage that default as best as possible so that the country doesn't really suffer unduly. What is your view in terms of what the solutions are at this point?
I explain you, because I hear you speaking before about drachma. Believe me, drachma is not the solution. Mm-hmm. Drachma will be the end of the end of the drama. You understand? Mm-hmm. That means if we accept and we believe that the solution is to go to drachma currency, we will sign by ourselves the end of this country, because it will be impossible for this country to work with that. This is the first thing.
Why do you say that, out of curiosity?
Because if we go to drachma solution, inflation in this country will rise up with two-figure numbers every year. It will be 25, 30, 35%. That will be the figure. Mm-hmm. A second, the depreciation of the drachma every day. I don't speak every year or every month. Every day will be something that we cannot control. Why? Because in this country, the 90%, the 80% of the products what we consume, we import. Mm-hmm. And even the products what we produce in this country, we import the raw materials to produce. You understand? Mm-hmm. So if this economy, it is 100% depending on international markets, you cannot work with drachma. It is impossible, especially today with huge international competition and with speculation also. So we have to forget the drachma scenario. Is not existing, is not valid, is not helping anybody, and is helping only speculators to push with speculation, because unfortunately there are some stupid people believing that drachma will be the solution to the Greek problem. This is the first thing. The second thing is that drachma scenario cannot happen, because there is not any regulation on the European Union Treaty. We are in the common currency. We are in the Eurozone. There is not any procedure for every European Union country to leave the Eurozone. So there is not even legal procedure to do that. And third thing, because we have experience in this country regarding local currencies and euro, I will tell you something. If you go around this country, very close to our borders, to the former Balkan communist countries, who they still have their own currencies, mm-hmm. Whatever transaction we are going to do there, you do that in euro. Mm-hmm. They have their own local currency, but again, their economy is running in euro. Their transactions are done in euro. Their prices are fixed in euro. Everything is done in euro, even if they have their local currency. So the solution of the local currency is not a solution. It is a non-solution. It is really the end of this country, and we have to forget that. We can find the solution staying in the euro, without leaving the euro, because there is possibility. There are different solutions for us to get out of this nightmare, but let's say what politicians want is not the solution with profit of the country, let's say. Why? Because the real problem here in Greece, believe me, it is exactly what is all around the world. There is not any difference for the financial crisis here in Greece from the other countries. That means the real problem is banks. As international financial crisis, it is a primarily bank crisis. Even here is the same. We are going to adopt all these solutions because governments are working on behalf of the banks. They want to save the banking system, and they don't care what will happen to the real economy and to the Greek citizens. This is the real truth, besides all the complicated words and the complicated theories what you hear.
But in a practical sense, in terms of, because I'm trying to think of this also from a political perspective, I think one of the things that has become pretty clear to people in Greece is that they can't depend on the government or any of the major parties to act as an honest broker for the Greek people in these foreign dealings. So having recognized that, they're looking for alternatives, but a real alternative doesn't yet exist. And what I'm trying to get...
Alternatives exist.
Yes, tell me.
There are a lot of financial alternatives to get out of this nightmare. The only thing it is that who is keeping the future of this country in his hands, he needs to make the right decision. This is. But the question is that they are not deciding by themselves. The governments here, believe me, they are working on the debt for more than 30, 40 years. They are making billions on the debt, even governments themselves. Because you know what means debt. Debt means loans, and loans means commission. And commission means money, means business, you understand? All the economies, they are growing with debt, even when they don't need debt to grow. This is the first thing.
Of course.
The second thing, what we propose here in Greece, it is to make an accounting evaluation of what exactly the debt situation it is here in Greece now, how that grew up in the last 30 years, to try to understand where this money go all this year, who we was paying with the money of the debt, these 350, 60 billion euros, where they go. So discovering where this money go, we could immediately find who has to pay even that, you understand? But here what we do, we have 350 billion euros of debt. We make a division for the number of the citizens, and we say that every Greek citizen owns 35,000 euros. This is totally stupid.
Right.
Because I didn't took 35,000 euros from the government debt. Other people, they didn't took 35,000 euros from the government debt.
Of course not.
Why we have to pay? This money has to be paid from the people who they took. And the governments, they know very well who took this money, because even the governments took the money. Even the two political parties who are governing this country in the last 30 years, they took money from the government debt. They also own money to the banks. Both of them, they are owning to the banks more than 150 million each. So they are a part of the problem. That means that they cannot be the solution.
Well, not only that, but we also know when Goldman helped the Greek government to enter the EU, the European Monetary Union, one of the loans that they gave them, if I remember correctly, it worked out to be effectively a 30% commission, if I'm correct.
Yes,
this is a big right. So this is a big issue as well. That it isn't just that the money was, because there's an attempt to paint this as a problem of profligacy by Greek pensioners, and that's clearly not what's going on here. There's of course a large public sector in Greece, and many people benefited, but the vast majority of that money went to pay interest, to fees, to people in the political system. But my question to you, when I meant that there wasn't a clear alternative, I didn't mean that there wasn't an alternative intellectually. Of course there is. There certainly is. But I meant in terms of the political dynamic, in terms of implementation, in terms of the need for some sort of a nationally sound government that has its priorities set. It seems to me that the people in Platea Syntagmatos and elsewhere, they don't want any of the governing parties. They don't want anyone from the parliament to govern them. So it means that there's a sort of a power vacuum, and that transition is where I feel like a lot of anxiety rests, because Greeks are willing to take the next step. They're willing to listen to people that make sense. But there isn't a clear leader or a clear group of people that are willing to initiate a political movement from what I've seen. Maybe you can enlighten us better because you've been there and you've been over this issue.
Look, this transition, yes, I agree with what you say. people at this moment, they are not angry with some specific political parties. They are angry with all of them because people, they discovered after 30 years, let's say after the first democracy in 1974, after 30, 40 years of democracy here in Greece, they understood that all these people who are in the parliament, with very, very few exceptions, let's say people, 10, 15, 20 persons, could not making part of the financial scam. All the others, they were involved, and they were mixed. Why? Because quite all Greek political parties own money to the banks.
Mm-hmm.
What that means? To who they convince that they are working for the citizens. If you own to the bank, you work for the bank. You understand? So this is the first thing that the people understand. And second thing, believe me, because today we are not living to the 50s and to the 60s, and even people who are not educated, who didn't go to universities, etc., they are following internet every day, they're reading newspapers, they can understand what is happening around. And because the people, they understood, they wake up. And because they wake up, they are in the Syntagma Square, in the other squares of this country. This transition moment is difficult and is dangerous, I agree with you. But during, with these transitions, new, healthy forces will grow up, and a new political class will emerge in this country, and that will create the future governments of this country. Political class will change at 99%. People who are in the parliament today as deputies, you will not see them after 1 or 2 years. Nobody of them will exist because they are obsolete.
Well, you know what? I agree with you, and I also feel optimistic about the situation. I want to thank you very, very much, Dr. Tobras, for coming on to our show and for talking about this issue. You just heard a Sound Money interview from my show covering the spread on 91.5 WNYE New York. For more news and headlines, as well as podcasts of our latest shows, you can visit my website at coveringdelta.com.